All right, let's jump right in. Today we're going to get into something really important, the effects of traumatic stress on our minds and our bodies. We'll be looking at the work of Dr. Lahargo to really break down what's happening inside our brains, and crucially, what the path to healing actually looks like.
So to really get a sense of the scale here, let's just start with a single number, 970 million. I mean, just let that sink in for a second. That's the estimated number of people right now living with a mental disorder across the globe. It's a staggering figure, and behind it are real people living real lives.
To put that 970 million into perspective, it means that nearly 1 out of every 8 people on this planet is dealing with a mental disorder. And the biggest slice of that pie? Anxiety and depressive disorders. They're the most common, affecting millions and millions of us.
So we're not just talking about numbers on a page here. When you see figures like that, you realize this isn't an isolated issue. It's a global mental health crisis, and we need to understand the real-world impact.
And the stakes? Well, they couldn't be higher. Over 700,000 people die from suicide every single year. And what's just absolutely heartbreaking is that it is the 4th leading cause of death for young people, kids and young adults between 15 and 29.
So you have to ask the question, right? Why? What is it about the world we're living in right now that's contributing to all this stress? Well, a lot of experts use this really interesting acronym to describe it. They call it a VUCA world.
VUCA. It stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. It's a framework, really, for getting a handle on the constant pressures we're all facing. So let's quickly break down what each of those words really means. Okay, first up, V is for volatile, and that's all about rapid, unpredictable change. I mean, just think about it. Technology, the job market, social media trends, everything is moving at lightning speed, and it often feels like this incredibly intense competition. Then you've got U for uncertain, and this one really hits home for a lot of people. The future, it just feels harder and harder to predict, doesn't it? And that uncertainty about our careers, the economy, even the planet itself, it can create this constant underlying anxiety. Next is C for complex. The problems we face today, they're not simple. They're all tangled up together with a million moving parts. Things like global warming or financial crises, there are no easy fixes. They're these giant interconnected puzzles. And finally, A is for ambiguous. We're constantly facing these weird, confusing situations where the right path forward just isn't clear. And that lack of clarity, that ambiguity, can be super disorienting and, you guessed it, really stressful. Okay, so that's the VUCA world we're living in. But what does that actually do to us, to our bodies? Well, when we're faced with a threat, whether it's real or just something we're perceiving, our body has this ancient alarm system that just takes over. You've probably heard of it, the fight or flight response.
When that alarm bell goes off in your brain, it triggers this incredible cascade of changes all through your body. And we're not just talking about feeling stressed out. No, this is an instantaneous, whole-body biological reaction. It's all designed for one thing, survival.
It all kicks off in the brain. The brain is like the command center, and it just floods your system with stress hormones like cortisol. And that's the signal for your entire body to go on high alert. Your pupils get wider to let in more light, and your heart starts pounding to pump oxygen everywhere.
And that chain reaction just keeps going. Your heart's pumping faster, non-essential systems like, say, digesting your lunch, they just shut down to save energy. And your liver dumps a load of glucose, which is sugar, into your bloodstream for a quick burst of fuel. It's a pretty amazing survival machine.
Now, this whole system is brilliant for getting us out of immediate danger. But there's a downside. When that stress is really severe or it happens over and over again, it can leave behind these deep, lasting scars, both emotionally and in our behavior. On the inside, emotionally, the long-term effects can be just devastating. It can show up as this chronic low self-esteem, this deep feeling of guilt, or just finding it almost impossible to trust other people, or even yourself.
And on the outside, in our behavior, it can look totally different from person to person. For some, it might be these sudden, explosive bursts of anger. For others, it could be the complete opposite, a crippling perfectionism or this constant need to be a people-pleaser just to avoid any kind of conflict.
And for some people, all of this intense emotional pain can lead down a really dangerous path, a cycle of self-harm. It usually starts with this emotional suffering that just builds and builds until it feels completely unbearable.
In that moment of overload, an act of self-harm can bring this brief sense of relief, a little dopamine hit, but it is immediately followed by this wave of shame and guilt, which just throws you right back to the beginning of that awful cycle.
So when all of these symptoms, the flashbacks, the nightmares, that severe anxiety, when they don't fade away with time, when they stick around for more than a month, that's when a professional might make a diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD.
But, and this is the most important part of this whole conversation, after all of that heavy stuff, this is absolutely not the end of the story. Our brains are incredible, they're resilient, and that means healing from trauma isn't just some vague hope, it is 100% possible.
And the really good news is there's a whole toolkit of treatments that are proven to be effective. There's medication, there's psychotherapy or talk therapy, and there are even these amazing technologies like TMS, which uses magnetic fields to stimulate brain cells, and neurofeedback, which helps you learn to regulate your own brain waves. There are so many pathways to recovery.
And within therapy, there are these super specialized approaches that are real game changers. You have cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, which helps you retrain your thought patterns. There's prolonged exposure therapy, which helps you safely face traumatic memories, and EMDR, which uses eye movements to help your brain process and file away those memories. They're all designed to help the brain literally rewire itself for healing.
And I think this idea is just so critical to remember. Healing isn't about pretending the trauma never happened or trying to forget it. It's about learning how to live a full, meaningful life where the memory is a part of your story, but it no longer controls it.
So if you take one thing away from all this, let it be this. Trauma can change the brain, yes, but so can healing. There is always hope, and that leaves us with a final, really powerful question to think about. If we know our brains can be rewired by trauma, what can we do? What can you do to actively help them rewire toward healing and resilience?